and welcome to another video. In today's tutorial, I will be painting a colorful gecko using the techniques of wet on wet and glazing. I'm using Arch's cold press watercolor paper and Turner Artist watercolor paper. I'll have those linked in the description, but you use what you have on hand. I'm putting tape around the borders of my 6x4.5 paper because I want a clean border around the artwork. Be sure to press down the tape firmly to seal it and keep paint from leaking under it. So now I'm just wetting the surface of the paper with clean water, making sure it's completely covered with water but no puddles. I'll be adding more water as I work through this process. Right now I'm making the background of my painting by dropping in paint and letting the watercolor do its thing, just spreading out and blending on the paper. Gives it soft edges, which is what I want for this background. This is always one of my favorite parts. I sped this part up a little so you can see the action. I'm also dropping in a little clean water to help the paint a bit, but not too much. There you can see I'm dropping in clean water. Just makes the red spread out more and blend with those other colors that are there. And just softens the whole background up. Did the same thing with the yellow, just dropping in some clean water. Using a dry brush to go along the tape and pick up any water and extra pigment. This is going to help get rid of any puddling at the bottom without disturbing the paint on the paper. And now I'm going to let this dry thoroughly and you will see how much it lightens up. So now I'm drawing my gecko with just a standard sketch pencil. You can also use a light or light colored watercolor pencil if you have one. I stay away from water soluble graphite because it can muddy up the paint colors. As for drawing the gecko, I just think about the shapes that make the object I'm sketching and round out the edges. I've always loved geckos and other small lizards. I occasionally find a little pink house geckos scooting around my house early in the morning. They're supposed to be good luck in some cultures, and bad luck in others. I'm going to go with the good luck because they're just too darn cute. Just adding in some simple flowers and leaves. Okay, so now I'm just going in with my kneaded eraser to lighten up the pencil lines. Now I'm going to be laying down these first swatches of color on dry paper, but letting the wet paint touch so it flows into the color next to it and blending the edges to where they're soft. I'll also lightly tap my paintbrush to help it along in places I want it to move more. One of the things I have to work on in my own watercolor practice is not choking up on the brush, holding it so close to the bristles. But sometimes with more precise lines, I can't help myself. So for the rest of the gecko's body, I will just continue laying in the color on the dry paper, but letting the adjacent colors flow into each other to soften those edges. Now I'm using my usual Turner artist colors, artist watercolors for this painting. And one of my favorite colors in the set that I have, which I only have I think 5 colors, is the magenta. It is just so vibrant and so pretty, and it is actually one of my very favorite colors. But for this piece, I will list the colors I've used in the description, but it's just the ultramarine, permanent yellow, the magenta, quinacridone magenta, and the rose madder hue. And I think a little Payne's gray for his eyes. So I'm laying down some permanent yellow on the leaves because I want that color to show through when I lay down the next color, which is going to be ultramarine blue. And that's the glazing, so we're going to be able to see the yellow, the ultramarine, and also the green that the two together make. I'm just working on his legs and feet and laying down the paint on dry paper. And this is actually another watercolor technique that I often don't even think about because it just is natural to put wet on dry. So this is the wet on dry, and it just gives you more control over the paint. It allows you to create textures, more precise lines, and when you don't want your colors to flow over your paper, then you just put them on the paper dry. Well, you put it on dry paper. And you can look at this, I've let it dry, and you can see just how much watercolor lightens up. So on his feet, I'm just going through and wetting his little feet with some clear water. And I'm going to be dropping the color in and letting it flow through his feet because I want those colors to be soft around the edges. I'm trying to zoom in a little bit here where you can kind of see how the yellow, the blue, and the purple at their meeting points are just kind of blending in together, and we're getting a little green. I'm just coming in on his face. I want to add another color here. So I'm wetting it with some clear water, and I'm just going to drop in some of the red. And I'm using some clear water here on my brush, just clean water. I've rinsed my brush out in clean water, and I'm pulling that paint. So I'm just wetting it, and it's pulling through to that purple. I'm doing the same thing here. I'm just wetting with clear water some of the surfaces that I want to add a little more color to for the vibrancy and to darken it up a little bit. Just going through and wetting the paper with some water and dropping in color and letting it flow to bring it back some of that intensity. So you can see right here, I know you can't see the palette, I've zoomed in, but I am using the ultramarine over the top of the permanent yellow, and like I talked about before, this allows you to see the yellow through and some places blue, but for the most part the green, and this is glazing. So you get the colors, the individual colors, but you also get the color that the two mix together to make. Speaking of palettes and some of the more zoomed out shots, you've probably noticed I have multiple palettes. Well, I did several paintings at one time, and what that does, it allows me to push a painting aside, pull another one up while one painting is getting dry or drying so that I can add to it. But that explains the multiple palettes that are on my desk right now. Just getting all these little accents for the flowers in. So I painted the middle of the flowers first and just dropped in a yellow, and then I came back with a little bit of the red, and I wanted those to mix together. And I actually lifted a little bit of that color there because it was definitely much darker than I wanted it to be. Then I'm going to move on to touching up his legs and finally give him some eyes. Now I'm just going to be painting in some petals and using the wet on dry technique at first, and then I'll come back in and drop in a little more color while it's still wet. I love that purple color. I just mixed some of the ultramarine with a touch of the magenta and the rose madder hue. So here again, while the flowers are still wet, I'm going to drop in some color and let that soften out, flow through the paint, and it just gives it a softer look to the flowers. Now I'm just going through and adding some paint, some color where I think I need a little extra. So now I'm going in with a white gel pen. I think this is a Milky Pop by Pentel, and adding just a little white around his eyes so he's not quite so scary looking. He's not scary looking though, he's just so cute. Okay, time for my favorite part, the tape pull. I'm gonna get this tape off of here. One of the most satisfying things is to pull the tape off and just see those clean edges. Now, one of the things you can do is go and where you can see one of the flowers is cut off, you can go and finish that flower and it just gives it a little more dimension. Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you found this tutorial helpful in some way. Let me know in the comments. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps my little channel. And until next time, keep painting. See you later.